Good morning, everyone. Before I begin, I'd like to just remind everybody, please, at the end of this talk, please answer the polls. There's a poll there that rates the speaker from 1 to 5, 5 being excellent and 1 being expected better. I doubt that'll be the case, however. And then please also go and have a look at the booths. There's some really good offerings at SAPICS this year. Even though we're not in person, it's still nice to go and see what's out there in the supply chain community and have a good chat about the services on offer. But let me jump straight in. Today we have Anton Coetzee, who's going to shine a green light on the sustainable supply chain, the topic that I'm quite passionate about. So I'm really keen to get stuck into this. But before we do, I just want to have a quick introduction of Anton. Anton is a senior team leader and engineer at Relog, a retail and logistics consulting firm specializing in designing and implementing fit-for-purpose and sustainable distribution infrastructure. He does logistics operations and supply chain networks. Anton has been working in the retail and distribution space for more than 10 years. He has significant experience in the implementation of distribution infrastructure, coordinating logistics projects with sites in excess of 30 hectares, further to site development planning, building design, construction, and large-scale projects. Anton's consulting function extends to the finer details in setting up supply chains, including internal distribution, operation design, technical procurement, and fit-out. So that's quite a CV there, Anton. I'm going to pass over to Anton to talk about how the green lights on sustainable supply chain. Very interesting topic. Thanks, Anton. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Andrew. So a very good morning to all our guests and our fellow speakers. Today I'll be looking at sustainability in the supply chain, and more specifically, the approach needed in developing a green and sustainable supply chain. Sustainability has become a very prevalent topic in the past few years. Not to say that it has been ignored in the past, but it certainly wasn't necessarily top of mind or integral part of the company's strategy as much as it is today. And with documentaries, as the recent one by David Attenborough, A Life on Our Planet, we are reminded of the far-reaching effects of our irresponsible actions towards nature and the resources around us, and that it has become more important than ever to act responsibly through the whole supply chain. So, moving on then on these slides. So, what is a green and sustainable supply chain exactly? So, being sustainable means to continue without harm, or with your operations without harming. And sustainability is actually measured in various ways, commonly known as the 3 pillars of sustainability. There's the impact on our people, impact on the economy, and the environmental impact, obviously the latter being our focus for today. And the UN has recently created a framework of very sustainable development goals to strive for and achieve by 2030. You'll note reference to these in some of the large corporates' sustainability reports, and which of these 17 goals they have set as targets are their own. And the demand from shareholders, employees, and customers have grown significantly and are driving companies to adopt sustainable practices. As we all know, supply chains can be fairly complex and comprise of many processes. There are a lot of touch points where we can strive to be more sustainable. And in our companies, we have to have a clear strategy of our approach to sustainable measures, all the way from the CEO to ground staff, and allow this approach to permeate and form a green culture in our companies. We also need to think holistically about the supply chain. We need to think about where we source our raw materials and the waste generated, down to how the consumer receives it. Is it biodegradable packaging, or is it one-way plastics ending up in landfills or in our oceans? Supply chains have gotten out of hand in some way, and consumers have become more demanding, wanting to have goods available all year around. Simple example, when we buy fruit, all fruits are not available throughout the year. Yet you go to your supermarket and find a pack of grapes sourced on one continent, packed on a different continent, and only then it's away to its final destination to be consumed. So think about the carbon footprint to fulfill this need. And I think it's something we need to keep on top of mind and rethink our needs at times. COVID also has had a tremendous effect on where we source our goods and have disrupted supply chains completely. Hopefully this was something good for local buying. We used to import and source a lot of product from the eastern countries, Since COVID rocked up on our shores, we were forced to look for local to keep us going. And I'm sure we've actually been pleasantly surprised by what we can actually find in as local products. The clothing industry, as an example, has been impacted significantly, where a lot of our clothing and material is sourced from China, Malaysia, and so forth, and arrived late on our shores due to COVID. But have we ever considered the carbon footprint of getting the clothes here? We constantly look for lowest production costs and product costs, but we need to assess our value chains in a holistic manner and do what is right for the environment. I think COVID has done just that and made us search a bit closer to home, making it a bit more sustainable in the long run. So how can we ensure a green supply chain? We're able to achieve this through the optimized and efficient design and operation of distribution infrastructure. This means in our buildings or facilities, our materials handling equipment, and in our design and operations. Through optimized operation of our distribution infrastructure, we can ensure best ROI, and at the same time, a green ROI by making use of efficient equipment and utilizing it efficiently. This in itself gives us a competitive edge and generates lowest life cycle costs going straight to your bottom line. Any operational gains relates to efficient operations, which in itself is sustainable and gives you the competitive edge. We have to think about the bigger picture in what green measures will mean in the long run, instead of focusing on short-term share prices. So there is that perception that going green is expensive. We're reluctant at times to consider green initiatives since there is this perception that green is expensive. But there is a lot of free green around us where the resources already exist and can be harnessed with little investment. A few examples to consider is solar. We look at waste heat from refrigeration plants, and we look at rainwater harvesting, just to name a few. And yes, there is an investment to make or install the solar panels, but the return is easily achievable. Especially our technology has grown and sophisticated. And the smart investment for both your pocket and the environment is to obviously go choose proven technology. And there's a continuous drive from all industries to make equipment more energy efficient. There's also scenarios where we're forced to look closer at how we are spending our resources, like the water crisis in the Western Cape. In some parts of the country, there's still a severe lack of water sources. And this forced us to make immediate investments into water recycling, harvesting, and storage. So if we go look at the genesis of green building design, green design has mostly been focused on our building construction in the past. And there are various bodies that have put together criteria to drive this green building initiatives and get companies to try and achieve these standards. In South Africa, we have the Green Building Council. In the UK, there's BREEAM. And so each country or nation has its own governing body. So we've come a long way in putting a lot of focus in sustainability in our building designs, and it's almost become a de facto standard. As an example, almost all warehouses these days are designed to be able to carry the load of EV panels on the roofs, either to be installed as a new build right now or to be retrofitted in the future. And solar technology has become very cost effective, so you now see companies retrofitting solar to their roofs now being able to reap the benefits of sustainable building design, as well as their return on investment. We've also moved away completely from old bay high bay lighting and fluorescent lighting in our warehouses. And they are now constructed with LED lighting, and existing buildings are also being retrofitted. LED lighting is also one of those technologies which have become increasingly cost effective to install, and companies are seeing the return on their investments. So I'd like to quickly showcase two buildings and elaborate on some of the green measures implemented, just to show you to what extent people are doing this. And it's not only environmental measures, but also social measures to make it equally enjoyable for staff. So on the right-hand side of the page, you'll see a distribution center developed by Renus Logistics in Netherlands, nicknamed the Tube, based on its futuristic, modern, and sleek design. This building was completed in 2018 as one of the most sustainable warehouses in Europe and one of the most sustainable warehouses in Europe. It has received an outstanding rating from BREEAM, which is the highest accolade to achieve. And whilst the building appears to be very modern, it is equally sophisticated from a green building design perspective. You can see from the aerial picture that the entire warehouse roof is covered with solar panels. It generates sufficient electricity for the entire site and operations and still feeds back energy into the local grid, enough to power about 750 households per year. So they've really gone the extra mile there. It's also placed a lot of focus on the lighting design with lots of natural light entering the building. They're also temperature controlled. All the LED lightings are managed with light management systems depending on how much light comes into the warehouse. And that in that way, they've also saving a lot of energy. And they've also utilized the building footprint at its max by building mezzanines and extra floors above the dispatch area, which doesn't require much height for value-added services and to do different activities there. They've also looked at there's also automation in this facility. Automation I'll speak a bit later about, but that's also a energy efficient operation. They also then finally use all their roof water to use in their ablutions facility, thereby not using any domestic supply. So if we move a little closer to home in our beautiful Cape Town, on the bottom right, you can see the Woolworths DC in Montague Gardens. This building has achieved a 5-star rating from the Green Building Council of South Africa. Our team members assisted Woolworths with the logistical layout of the site and the internal operations to ensure efficient and sustainable operational design. From a building perspective, you can see the placement of PV panels. In South Africa, we are currently limited on the amount of industrial electricity that we are allowed to generate outside of the Eskom grid. So therefore, you can see limited amount of solar. But this solar system delivers more than 500 megawatt hours per year, enough to power 50 households in a year, average households. And during construction, they repurposed enormous amounts of building rubble and diverting that from the landfill. They've also ensured water-wise landscaping and utilizing stormwater and borehole for irrigations. So in summary, our buildings are the foundation for our operations, and it must remain a big focus to design and construct these as green and sustainable as possible. If we start looking at our day-to-day operations of getting goods to the next point of supply chain, we look at our daily transport. Roughly 60% of our supply chain cost lies in transport. It is also generally the largest contributor to our carbon footprints and has a big impact on the environment. We need to therefore ensure we are as efficient and optimized as possible to minimize our time and quantum on the roads. Since it is such a big contributor, it's very important for us to optimize on our transport. And there are various avenues which makes our transport more efficient and contributes to more sustainable transport. These things are like sophisticated route scheduling, planning, making sure our vehicles travel the least possible distance and make the best use of our vehicles. This in turn improves our turnaround times, resulting in less vehicles on the roads and making our transport more sustainable. When we design our facilities, we also place a lot of focus and emphasis on the yard, ensuring docking of trucks occur as efficiently as possible. We often only think of transport as the kilometers traveled on the road, but equally important to optimize our vehicle utilization within the boundaries of our facilities. Then if we move further on the point of transport is rail. Now, rail in South Africa is underutilized, and because of our congested networks and the inefficiencies in the port. Just drive past Cape Town's container stacks and see the massive queues and trucks having to spend hours and hours and sometimes days waiting for containers to be offloaded. Rail is much more cost-effective and more environmentally friendly for our long-distance travel. The bulk of our volumes sit in Joburg inland. Now, the route from Durban Port to Johannesburg and surrounds is one of the most expensive routes to travel in, and it is not sustainable. We need integration with inland ports where goods can travel in containers from the shipping lines onto rail and to destuffing facilities in Joburg. There's similar plans in the pipeline, but there's a lot of red tape and bureaucracy which needs to be cleared to make this a reality. If you look at the N3 as is, it's almost like a railway already, with trucks driving bumper to bumper all the way to Joburg. If we're able to move all of this volume to rail, it will decrease congestion significantly, reducing maintenance required on the roads and obviously reducing the carbon emissions significantly. If we then go look a bit in the future of transport, there's some exciting stuff happening. We recently did a project for a client in Switzerland where we were briefed to consider the Hyperloop or cargo soustrain, or what they call the CST, sorry I don't speak French, in the conceptual design. This train would remove significant volumes of underutilized trucks from the road, making it less congested for citizens to move around. Plus, it creates a unique underground network to consolidate volumes, making the transport more efficient. The idea would be for these networks to be linked to distribution centers or centralized delivery points in areas where only short distance of road travel is required. So it drops down into the underground, into the CST vehicle, and that does the long haul to the main cities. It seems quite futuristic, but it may be a reality as soon as 2030 already. You may have seen also Virgin has also recently did their first successful passenger trip in the Hyperloop, which is a high-speed passenger train. Think Boeing speeds of travel speeds. And this will link big cities in just minutes, far more sustainable than air and road travel. This all, however, requires big investment in infrastructure and also a lot of research and change. So there's a lot of study that needs to go into this. In the picture, you can also see a Tesla semi-electric truck. Walmart has actually placed an order recently on more than 130 of these units. And it's with Walmart being the biggest brick and mortar store or retailer, it is great to see that these that the big guys are also investing and moving into this direction. Moving on to the next slide. So, as I mentioned previously, what is also sometimes ignored is the efficiency on our distribution sites itself. While we think of the transport to be long distance traveling, there's optimization we can achieve on site as well. In our designs of the facilities, we think of processes such as the placement of the gatehouse, integrating fueling with the gatehouse, placement of the buildings, and the logical flow, space in our marshalling yards to ensure quick turnaround of the vehicles. If we can save a few minutes on site, it might seem minuscule, but if you have a fleet of 200 plus trucks, every minute adds up, and that's translated into time and fuel lost. So we need to integrate the optimized thinking of transport into our facilities. The more time we can get out of one truck, the less vehicles are required, which in itself is very much more sustainable. We also consider the implementation of strategic services on site, such as washing facilities and diesel refueling. This too contributes to less time on the road and utilizing dead time on site outside of the driver's active travel hours. So once again, less time on the road, less vehicles, which means reducing emissions and once again being more sustainable. One of our clients actually have invested in cryogenic cooling technology where they use nitrogen on their trailers to keep the trailers refrigerated. They make use, they inject this nitrogen into the trailer boxes compared to conventional diesel-fueled refrigeration units. In this way, we're reducing a lot of diesel consumption, and it's also much more environmentally friendly since nitrogen is a natural gas and a byproduct from mining activities. We have assisted them by putting these necessary infrastructure on site for filling all the trucks on the distribution site. And in one of the latest designs we've done, we've actually planned this nitrogen filling in line with the diesel filling, and which that just reduces the whole standing time of the vehicle on site, since you are filling diesel at that time in any event. So just moving on to the new slide. Then one of the last topics on buildings I'd like to cover, which integrates closely with our physical internal operations, is that of warehouse floors. The importance of this tends to be overlooked. There's a once-off opportunity to get this right during construction, and it impacts the lifetime of the facility substantially. It is a sizable investment, obviously, to do in the building design, but a bad floor creates so much inherent efficiencies and affects machine productivity and machine life. Floors are also disruptive to maintain and to repair, so that also translates into productivity loss. And less productive machines mean shorter lifespans, and that also is more energy and labor and affects the sustainability of your operations. Right, so how does operational efficiency help green initiatives, you may ask? So there are various aspects in our operations to consider as part of our contribution to sustainability. In the next few slides, I'll look a bit closer at some of these operational areas where we can gain efficiency and make our operations more sustainable. In short, an increase in productivity, efficiency, and accuracy results in increased payback And it also means reduced energy consumption, reduced labor, reduced waste, and ultimately reduced costs. Sorry then. So let's just switch to the inside of the typical distribution operation. The efficiency of our operations are ultimately defined by what goes on the inside of our buildings. Here are plenty of opportunities to drive efficiency and sustainability. In the picture are just some of the elements in the warehouse where we can look at being more sustainable. And I'm briefly going to touch on some of these on the next few slides and how that contributes to sustainable operations. One of the hot topics that have come to light of late due to COVID is the question around automation and mechanization. Automation comes at a high cost, but it delivers high performance and super high accuracy. So when we consider automation in the light of sustainability, it comes down to optimization, cutting down excess travel, better resource allocation, reduced energy, and reduced labor. However, we know in South Africa, automation is a bit of a challenge with high unemployment rates, a lack of skilled technicians to maintain these, and also the comparison of cost of manual labor versus automation. So that requires an in-depth study and also what is right for your business. Automation isn't necessarily the Hail Mary. If we look at warehouse management systems, another way of digitizing our operations, these systems have become almost standard in any warehouse operation to drive efficiency. In this day and age of data analytics and information, one cannot afford not to have a proper WS in place. With the right analytics in place, one can gain an enormous amount of insight into the operational in real time to optimize your operations. Similar to automation, WS optimizes various activities and resources in the warehouse, whether it's automated or manual, together with the assistance of technology, of course. It plans for the shortest routes, manages congestion between resources, improves pick rates, and optimizes machine travel, once again improving overall efficiency of the operations. Then if we move to battery charging, common in all our facilities, and that's one of the biggest consumers of electricity. The green trends that we've seen in battery charging is making use of high-frequency modular chargers, which optimize on the amount of energy required based on the current battery levels. Battery management systems also have become more common, which ensures that we cycle our batteries correctly, and we can, in that manner, we extend the actual life of our batteries as much as possible. This also gives us insight into the condition of these batteries and when it becomes imminent to replace it, and thereby maximizing as much as you can on the life of these batteries. There's also been significant progress in the lithium-ion battery market, and although it's still quite expensive in comparison to your conventional lead-acid systems, we get increased cycles and there's a longer life and it draws less energy. And there are other benefits as well. Because lithium-ion is able to hold its charge longer than the equivalent size lead-acid battery, it means that the lithium-ion battery can be smaller, so which in turn means we can use less space on the machine and possibly reduce our racking aisles being able to fit in with smaller machines. However, it's obviously important to note that each operation has got its own limitations and should be considered case by case. So don't go and move all your racks closer just for that reason. All of the above that I've just mentioned results in reduced total energy consumption and extended battery life, which means less waste and increased sustainability. Returnable equipment. So if we start looking at what we send back to our stores each day and how we pick the goods, we can identify a few measures of how we can minimize waste in the operation. For starters, we should look at avoiding making use of once-off plastics. We tend to use a lot of shrink wrap in our operations, and although it's very cost effective, we must ensure that we are able to recover it from our stores for responsible recycling. Our operations also generate a lot of cardboard. We send goods to stores in cardboards and should also ensure it's recovered or reused in some shape or form. The more sustainable approach is to look at totes and crates which can be reused multiple times. Dollies, pallets, and roll cages go hand in hand with the use of totes and crates. The challenge with returnable equipment, though, is that it requires proper infrastructure to return these to our DCs and to maintain these to be reused. All of what I've just mentioned is environmentally friendly in itself, but like I've mentioned in the beginning, we have to have a holistic view of the supply chain. Roll tailers not only avoids packaging, but can improve your operational turnaround time significantly. we recently worked with a client who loads their trailers by hand and dead stack the cartons in the vehicle, obviously to get the most utilization out of it. However, if you go and look at, it's great obviously for them in terms of vehicle utilization, but if you go and look at the store level, it takes up to 2 to 3 hours to offload 150 cartons for a single store. Now multiply that by a few hundred stores, and one can immediately calculate the amount of wasted time in the last mile trying to optimize on vehicle utilization. So we proposed looking at a wheel solution which would substantially decrease the time at store and would allow them to do more drops with the same vehicle in a day, which in itself is also utilizing a vehicle as best as you can. So that made it can make it more effective, and also it's a lot user-friendly at store. So one always needs to consider the whole supply chain. As I've said, it's not only where you optimize at one point. Further on the topic of these returnable assets is if we look at how they get soiled at store, that also means that we have to have a suitable return center where these can be washed and cleaned. Now, these obviously use a lot of energy and electricity to maintain these. Now, we've implemented a few roll-turn and crate washing solutions for our clients where the equipment goes through this machine to get washed. And the basic process of this machine is filling a tank with water, heating the water by means of a diesel or electric boiler, going through its washing cycles, and then finally going through a drying cycle. And through the years, we have learned various ways of saving energy to cut down on electrical costs, water consumption, and the use of detergents just being rinsed down the drain. For example, in one of the projects we've been working on recently, we're making use of waste heat from a refrigeration plant to preheat the water prior to filling the machine, thereby avoiding a lot of energy on heating the water from cold to the required 50 or 60 degrees. In another application, we implemented a centrifugal dryer, which basically spins the crates compared to a conventional blower, which just blows air from the sides. And that's allowed the crates to become out a lot drier. It saves almost 95% of the electricity to the conventional blower. So just moving then on to truck washing, which is also common on some of the sites. And what we've seen also, and for example, on the crate washing where we can save a lot of water, that water that intends to be dumped can also be used for these purposes, like washing the outside of your trucks. And we always have to think about that circular, call it almost circular economy on the site, where we try to reuse all our resources to the nth degree. And with specialized oil separation tanks, which is a standard thing, one can easily reuse water multiple times to wash trucks and use less fresh water. Then if we look at waste recycling, along with the assets that are returned from stores, there's obviously space on the return vehicles to collect waste cardboard and plastic and return it to the DC. One can have an incentive program to motivate the stores to send back their cardboard, send back their plastic, and that allows you to increase the amount of recycling that you can achieve in the entire supply chain. What we've also seen is the cardboard is to bale it into pellets or briquettes that can be used as a heat source for boilers once again. So using those resources in a different manner and trying to maximize the energy that you can get out of anything. And recycling has actually become a profit center. We used to pay someone to get rid of our excess cardboard. There are still companies that don't even know that they can get something out of their cardboard, and they just accept that someone's going to come and take it away for them because that takes away the headache. But we can actually sell these cardboard back to the paper mills and recover some of these costs. And that's also become a big motivator to reduce the waste to landfill. And then finally, moving on to product returns. Andy from Food Forward. I don't know if you guys know Andy from Food Forward, but Food Forward is a company who tries to sort of intercept all these foods that are close to expiry dates, food being wasted, trying to intercept that. And there's a lot of, and it's not even, we say waste, but it shouldn't be called waste. It's actually surplus food that is that is still fit for consumption. And it should be purposely used in our communities. And other ways and means of selling these products to the staff or communities within the area. The picture on the bottom left there, you can see a mini warehouse where products come from the stores, and they're consolidated into this little warehouse where the public, it's actually a project in the UK called the Real Food Project, where people who can't afford necessarily to go to supermarkets and buy, they call it pay as you feel. So people come there, they take what they need, and they actually say, well, I can only afford £5 for this, so I'm gonna pay that, and that's how it's get accepted, and that's how they help the poorer community, which I thought was a great initiative. There's also final alternatives of burning foods if it's really beyond the point of safe consumption to produce biogas for alternative uses, like the New Horizons waste plant in Athlone in Cape Town. And the target at the end of the day should be zero landfill. We must learn to reduce, reuse, and lastly, recycle in that specific order. We must try to avoid making use of landfill and waste ending up in our oceans. So, yeah, there's a lot to think about, a lot to consider, and I hope I managed to put some more focus and triggered some responses to strive to be more sustainable. I'd like to close out by reiterating that sustainability in operations are achieved by efficient operations. Driving productivity, accuracy, and efficiency will ultimately give you the lowest costs and the greenest supply chain. So, yeah, I'll leave you with a last thought from the documentary, A Life on Our Planet. It says, we are ultimately bound by and reliant upon the finite natural world about us. So we only have so much to work with, and we must do that responsibility and leave some earth left for our grandchildren. So, yeah, thanks for listening, and I trust all of you can take something out of this session and, yeah, work together towards a more sustainable future. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Anton. That was an excellent presentation and truly inspiring for the greater supply chain community. We have about 7 minutes remaining. Does anyone have any questions? Please put them in the panel or in the QA. I have one question. You mentioned the returnable packaging. How does that add to complexity when you need to manage not only the output but the returnables as well from a supply chain point of view, and how do you manage them such that there's a natural attrition to returnable packaging as well?
Yeah, so I think it comes down to as I've said, if you've got this proper infrastructure set up, and you've set up your vehicles and the processes that's stored to return these, it's almost a natural thing to do, and without having to send all these stuff back and forth from stores, or rather to stores, and bring it back and forth. I mean, you are driving an empty truck back to your DC, so there's that. It's almost natural just to invest in that and try to minimize your waste in that effort. And yes, you have to sort a lot of stuff at your DC, so you need to have that proper operation set up to be able to separate food, surplus food, and damaged product from your containers, and that's a whole logistical setup that you have to obviously design into your operations.
Yeah, thanks. I have a question here from Grant Swanepoel. I'm interested in the metrics used to measure success of green initiatives within supply chains. What key metrics have you seen being used, and in what forum have you seen these being discussed or made visible within organizations?
So the metrics, I think, is tangible at this stage. You're looking at your electricity use, you're looking at your water consumption, you're looking at the amount of recycling tons that you're able to avoid going to landfill. I think that's the tangible environmental impact that you can look at. In terms of social sustainability, that all comes down to, I guess, staff happiness and actually surveying staff and ensuring that constantly by an HR department having steps and processes in place to actually measure that, and I think staff turnaround obviously talks directly to that. That's another measure that you can look at. And obviously, economy is your people thriving? Do people make ends meet, and are they happy to work there? In terms of forums, there's nothing specific at this stage that I necessarily align myself with. I do a lot of reading, and we also just try to stay ahead of best international practices and keeping abreast of what's happening in the rest of the world. I don't know if that's answered your question, Grant, but you're happy to contact me afterwards if you wish.
Cool, thanks for that, Anton. Any other questions from the audience? Doesn't look like it. Cool, thank you, Anton. We finished a little bit early, but thanks very much for the session. Truly inspiring, something I care very much about. And I'm sure there'll be some great discussions after the fact. You can go and meet with Anton after the session in the VIP room. And please also don't forget to fill out the poll and go and visit the booths and network as much as possible. That's what we're here for. Once again, thanks, Anton. Great presentation.
Great. Thanks so much, Andrew. Cheers.